Let's go ahead. So let's start our conversation today about resilience. We've got two amazing experts to guide us through our conversation. And the first one I'm excited to introduce you to is Melissa Villanueva. Melissa is the CEO, owner, and founder of Brewpoint Coffee, a multi-million-dollar coffee company with three coffee shops, a coffee roastery, and a premier event space. Melissa's innovative approach to running a successful small business has been featured on Forbes, Entrepreneur, Fast Company, and many other leading publications. It's so great to have you here, Melissa.
To be here, Brittany. Thanks for having me. Hello,
Of
everyone.
Of course, of course. And we're going to drop where you can stay in touch with our speakers today as well. Next, we have Oren SHANI. Oren is an advisor certified by the Association of Accredited Small Business Consultants with over 5 years of experience. He started and managed a seven-figure business in the live event and production industry. Combining his business education with his entrepreneurial experience, Oren provides a robust knowledge base while simultaneously drilling into core functions of the business, including financial positioning, cash flow analysis, and understanding credit and financing. Entrepreneurs seeking capital, understanding their financial standing, and developing a financial plan will benefit from working with Oren. He helps business owners understand their vision and make a plan to achieve their financial goals. Great to have you here, Oren.
Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. Excited to talk to you today.
Wonderful. Okay, so we got our topic, we've got our speakers. Let's just go ahead and jump into it. Melissa, I want to start with you. When you hear the word resilience in the context of business, what does it mean to you, and why is it something every business owner should actively build towards?
Yeah, resilience is a great word. And when it comes to business owning, in my mind, it's knowing what you're not willing to compromise. Like it's the thing where you just like you have no other option. And so whether that is your business as it currently stands or something core about it, right? It's like maybe that for you, it's uncompromisingly that you want to be a business owner. You're flexible in what it can look like, but there's really no way out. And so a little bit of an example of how I start my business and how I think about what it would look like if I didn't start it this way. So 11 years ago, I decided I wanted to open a coffee shop. I wanted to put a business plan together because I wanted to be responsible about it. But I ended up finding a coffee shop on Craigslist within the first month of doing my business planning. And I had no idea what I was doing, but me and my 6 month boyfriend bought it. And we had no other options. Like it was just like all the money that we had, we put into it. And within the first month, we were just trying to figure out how to do this. And the goal was just getting a little bit better every single day. And I thought about the options I would have had otherwise, right? It was like, oh, I could, I had people who were like, you can just start it out of like, our community space. You can have this small little thing that sounds like a lot more responsible to start it off with where you could, start it out of a church or start it off a place that would just be a lot less risk oriented. And the more that I thought about how I function and what would have worked well, I think me just going all in is what I needed to do in order for me to feel like I had no other option. I had to make it work. And so I don't think it always has to be going all in, but it's about knowing like, even if it's your side hustle, like, what are you not willing to compromise? Are you not willing to compromise not being a business owner? Are you not willing to compromise, any aspects of it, whether it's your mission, your values, how you go about doing it. Being resilient is just like not allowing yourself to really have an option out.
Mm, that's such a great point about drilling down to what it is for you specifically and getting a lot of clarity about that. Um, Love that. Oren, my next question is for you. So you've helped so many business owners with this, but what are some common financial or operational vulnerabilities that small business owners often overlook until it's too late?
Yeah, great question. I'm obviously looking at this question more from a financial lens than anything else. But I think that this really kind of spans across all elements of the business. Not tracking your cash flow is the number one thing. I come across a lot of businesses that, you know, they don't know what a cash flow statement is. They don't know what it's telling them. And it probably is the single most important financial information you can have for your business. It's not just knowing how much money is in the bank account, it's understanding patterns, understanding how cash moves in and out of your business, and essentially being able to maintain a healthy level of cash reserves at any given point. Um, and I know that's not easy, easier said than done, but that really is the goal here. You always want to maintain, you always want to be tracking and monitoring how your cash is moving, how much cash is coming in, when it's coming in, and how much cash is leaving, and how much cash you have at any given point. That is really, really, really crucial here, because having the ability to maintain a steady cash reserve in your bank accounts is going to allow you to weather any storm that comes up that may not necessarily be expected. Maybe things that you didn't budget for, emergency situations, whatever the case may be. You want to have that bucket to tap into if you need. So tracking your cash flow is really, really important, and making sure that you are managing the operations of your business so that you're consistently bringing enough cash to support how much cash is leaving the account and maintaining that balance in the accounts. Um, Now, there's, again, easier said than done. There are plenty of things that you can do. Ultimately, make more sales. That's like the number one, is sell more stuff, right? Melissa had a really good example the other day of tracking your receivables. If you are a service-based company, for instance, and you render services and then you invoice out, track your receivables. If you are looking at your aging, your receivables aging report, and you're seeing that you haven't been paid from client A in 60 days, client B in 90 days, hunt that down, knock on their door, get that payment that you've earned. That will bring in more cash in the bank. From the expense side of things, learn to kind of get into the mindset of figuring out how to stretch out your cash payments as much as possible. So, when I was running my business, every vendor that I worked with, I would call them up, I would negotiate with them, I would try to establish installment agreements instead of paying everything up front, or deferring payments. When I bought QuickBooks, I pushed them to give me 3 months of QuickBooks for free, because that's how much time I told them I needed to get used to the system, make sure that that was going to work for me, and they gave me that. So I had 3 months of QuickBooks for free, at like the premium package or whatever that was. So you want to get into that mindset of figuring out how to nickel and dime your vendors, essentially. Instead of paying more cash up front, learn to stretch that out as much as you possibly can. That's going to help you maintain your cash balances. And then ultimately track your spend. Look at your profit and loss statement, go line by line, everything that you're spending money on, look at that, prioritize that. Do you need that? Can you trim that down? Are you entering into are you entering into low season where you can kind of start cutting back on overhead, things like that. So always kind of keeping an eye on your financials, on your cash movements, and seeing how you can be creative about stretching out that cash outflow as much as possible.
Yeah, that's great advice, especially when you think about um, negotiating with, sometimes that's not like top of mind, that you can negotiate with some of your vendors and make things that work for you. But I think you're totally right that having that reserve is what's going to help you be a little bit more resilient, essentially, when tough times come, because they always come. Okay, Melissa, my next question is for you. Can you walk us through a moment when Brewpoint Coffee faced a major disruption and what changes you made to come out stronger on the other side?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was thinking about this one, I know that for myself, and I'm curious here how many people here have employees, because having employees is some of like the best and hardest pieces of running a business, right? And so, one thing for me was an issue where I had with a manager. We ended up having to let them go. And it was one of the situations in which they were attempting to essentially, they wanted to get back at us in any way they could. So they were calling OSHA, they were calling the health department, they were calling on past employees, and it was just like an array of things where they just had time and nonstop, just like trying to figure out ways to kind of make us run around in circles. Fortunately, there was nothing really to find out, so it was something that it was just time consuming. It was one of those things for me on a mental and emotional standpoint. It was just kind of like, you're thinking about what you do wrong, what you could have done better. But also in that specific instance, I think what was anxiety orienting for me was I didn't know what else he would do, right? And so a lot of times when we face an obstacle, when we face a disruption, and we don't have certainty of how the outcome is going to be, or if there's going to be a cascade of issues that happen with something like that, your mind can run a million miles an hour and you can kind of think of all the worst case scenarios. And I remember I talked about it in therapy, and my therapist was just like, future Melissa can handle this issue. And I
Mhm.
remember just suddenly having so much groundedness in the presence and confidence of just like, yeah, future me is pretty great. So she will handle like, whatever comes our way because like there's really nothing that, I feel like I couldn't handle if, if, certain things come to light. And so that being said, sometimes part of our biggest, distraction or disruption ends up being our mindset. It ends up being that one big thing happened and our mind goes a million other ways of possible things that might happen after that. And we get consumed by that in a way that like we aren't able to focus running our business, working on our business, all our time, energy starts going to all the possible what ifs. And it's learning about future you can handle that, deal with the issue that's at hand, make sure you're, aware of what could happen in the future, but trust yourself, and trust that you and your team can handle those things in the future.
Yes. Oh, that's such a great point about refocusing your energy on the present instead of the what if, because there's so many options. I really like that mindset shift. Um, Oren, my next question is for you. When working with small business owners, how do you help them shift from reactive problem solving to that proactive resilience planning?
I love this question. I love it because when I work with clients on this, I not only when we make that transition from that reactive to proactive, everything changes about like their mood, their energy. They get more excited about their business, like they feel good about things, and the obviously the stress levels are lower. So, yeah, this is a really fun practice that I do with my clients to kind of transition to that thinking about the future phase. Um, and the methodology that I use here is, talking about reading, learning how to read the room. Okay. Know what's happening in the environment around you, know what's going on that you can't control, and then create some control mechanisms based on that. So I look at this on three levels. One is what's happening in the economy, right? High level, you got to know what's happening. There's a lot in the news right now. I'm sure you all are keeping somewhat informed, about tariffs and inflation and AI is taking over reality and all that stuff. That's important to know because while that may not have direct impact on your business, it's going to create a ripple effect. Everything that's happening on the high level is going to ripple effect and somewhere along the way, it's going to hit your business. So for example, one of the biggest ways we measure the economy is through consumer spending, right? Consumer sentiment, right? How much are people spending on products and services? So that is a metric we use to measure the economy. That will have a ripple effect depending on if consumer sentiment is high or consumer sentiment is low. That will affect your business at some point because people are either spending more money or they're spending less money, and it's your products and services that they're either spending more on or spending less on. So knowing that metric, consumer sentiment, consumer spending, allows you to understand environmentally how that could come to directly or indirectly impact your business. And what I will say, just giving a quick read on what's happening now. We're just about to get Q2 economic data to kind of see what's going on. But if we look at what we do have on Q1 2025, what we're seeing is that we've been in a slight contractionary phase of the economy. As you all know, the economy expands, it contracts, it ebbs and flows. So Q1 was a kind of a downward kind of phase, and that's totally normal. That's totally normal. But what does that tell you? What does that indicate to you as the business owner? It indicates to you that credit is tightening, so lenders are getting a little bit more risk averse. So their standards for giving business loans are a little higher. That tells you that consumer spending is slightly down. People are saving a little bit more money, spending less on consumption of products and services. So it's things like that that you can take, data points like that you can take, and you decide what you want to do with it. But that gives you the data to kind of figure out how to make strategic decisions for your business. So that's high level. Second level, what's happening in your industry, right? You're building this house. What's the state of the dirt that you're trying to build this foundation on, right? So how are customers changing? How is demand changing? How is technology affecting the industry? How is AI getting integrated into your industry? How do you kind of utilize this AI integration to your advantage as opposed to kind of this replacement theory that everyone's, concerned about? Who are your competitors? What are they doing? How do you compare against your competitors? What makes you different from them? So these are kind of good data points to know a little bit more directly impacting your business, that you can kind of better understand your position in your market related to other players here. So that's really important to know because then again, you can make strategic decisions about how you're going to keep a leg up in your industry. And then the third level is going to be what's happening in your neighborhood, right? So businesses are part of communities. Local governments can shape how businesses are able to run. So this is less of that ripple effect and more of a direct kind of impact on your business. Is your local government incentivizing businesses? Are they creating more roadblocks? Is there development happening in your area? Is there how well are you plugged into the local networks? What kind of resources are available to you? So that information, that knowledge base on the local level can pay dividends for your business as well. So those are kind of the three levels I see in terms of kind of gauging the environment and creating mechanisms around the things that you can't control, essentially. By the end of the day, what you really want to do is you want to start thinking, about the future. What does the next 6 months of your business look like? What does the next 12 months of your business look like? With all these key assumptions of what's happening in the environment, playing into those projections, those forecasts.
Yeah, I love that strategy for taking it in each different level because it feels like you have a little bit more control over the uncontrollable. Um, so many great points in there. Okay, my next question is for both of you, but I want to start with Melissa, and specifically in terms of like mindset. So, what are some accessible ways small businesses can, think about diversifying to reduce risk? And I know you have some thoughts about mindset when it comes to this.
Yeah. No, so kind of going back to even like the resilience question and knowing what your mission is and what you're not willing to compromise. So you could say I'm in the business of coffee, which I absolutely am. And that has a lot of risk involved right now with a lot of international products, right? Because there's global warming, and so there's less inventory to demand. There is the tariffs. There's the USAID cuts that is heavily affecting the long-term sustainability of coffee farming. There's all these different things that, when I look at being a coffee business, right? Like there's a lot of risk in my mind around the product. That being said, when I look at what I'm really not willing to compromise, it's being a community-oriented business model. And so, though it is around coffee and I love coffee, I can diversify it. Coffee shops have tea, they have matcha, they have chai, they have pastries, they have hot chocolate, they have so many other things that they provide. We do a lot of community events, we do a lot of private events. at the end of the day, it's about what kind of products can people gather around, and not just gather around weekly, but possibly daily. And so for me, I can get, when I think of myself purely as a coffee business and all my eggs are in this basket of one singular product, it is overwhelming. It feels like, when I'm seeing all these stacked reasons why coffee is going to get harder and harder throughout the years, it can be quite overwhelming. But when I think of myself as a business that focuses on community building, and I need to just make sure I have an array and diversification of products to be able to bring people in and make people excited, then it feels a lot less overwhelming. And even just the difference between, someone drinking a cup of coffee versus someone drinking a latte, and diversifying it by having, different types of milks and different types of syrups, right? Like that makes the product that I'm using an even smaller portion of my coffee shop business. And so, whatever that means for you, right? Like you might think of yourself as a product or service business or on a very specific thing, but what's the thing that you won't compromise that makes you excited to do what you're doing? And what are the ways in which you can diversify that?
Yes, I love it because it ties into that first point you brought in about what are your core values, what aren't you willing to compromise, and then bringing it into like a strategy, real world. Okay, so that's what I'm not willing to compromise. Here's how I'm going to diversify, and your business is stronger for it. So great. Oren, I have the same question for you, and I'm feeling like you might have some financial insight on this, but what are some accessible ways small businesses can begin diversifying, whether that's like revenue, streams, vendors, operations, just to reduce that risk?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because while we're talking about reducing risk, we're also simultaneously talking about growing and expanding the business, which is ultimately what any business owner wants. And I think, in Melissa's case, an amazing example of, engaging the community, expanding value. I mean, that's ultimately what growing a business is all about, is making more value for more people. And so by doing that, you inherently reduce your risk. So I see this kind of a twofold question, and a fun question to answer. But kind of along the same lines, when it comes to diversifying revenue, there's a lot of ways to do this. Obviously, new products. Introducing new products is probably the like kind of the first thing we think about when we talk about diversifying revenue, but that comes with a strategic element, right? How do you decide what products to introduce? How are they going to be manufactured? How are you going to market those new products? And the way I kind of like to think about it is go for the low-hanging fruit first. See if you can not only, when it comes to introducing new products, how are you going to do so in such a way that it's cohesive with your overall ecosystem of products and services, right? I mean, Apple is probably a classic example here. All of their products are integrated into one another. So if you're an Apple user, you're probably not going to buy a Samsung phone. You're probably going to stay within the Apple ecosystem. And obviously that's a high level example, but similar concept here of kind of not just creating something brand new that's so different from what you already do, but having it kind of stringed with kind of what your existing products are, and kind of maintaining that overall ecosystem. And the other way I like to look at it is, how can you introduce new product what that can merge, or essentially, your production cycle can stay the same. So can you produce new product that kind of can go along the manufacturing process that you already have in place, as opposed to build an entirely new manufacturing process, entirely new suppliers, entirely new supply chain. See if you can kind of achieve that economies of scale, right? By kind of keeping the costs relatively the same, the supply chain process relatively the same, but you are now diversifying the products that are available. So things like add-ons or accessories to already existing products, things like that. So that's what I would say is think about it from a strategic standpoint. The other thing that you can do is look into new markets. Perhaps your product can provide value to people that you didn't expect. Maybe there's demographics or certain psychographic characteristics of different people that will get value from your products that you didn't think before. I like to think of pickleball as an example here. it's a lovely case study because how did pickleball start? It was mostly just from what I've seen, older individuals who were maybe a little less athletic as they were before. That was really kind of pickleball was kind of that their sport. And then look at it now. I see teenagers playing pickleball. I see pickleball as extracurricular activities at school. So it kind of grew into this like huge thing, serving multiple demographics, not just the original one. And that's kind of how industries change and evolve. Demand changes, patterns change. What people didn't think was cool before thinks it's cool now. So you have to track that and see, and never assume that you're always going to be serving the same people the entire time you're running your business. It's going to change, and you want to harness that change, right? The last thing I'll say is about volume. So one of the things I see a lot with small businesses are they're trying to, maximize their price, price it at the highest level as possible, make the biggest margin that they possibly can for every single sale. That is one methodology, sure, but that's not the only methodology. You can be low volume, high margin, but you can also be, high volume, low margin as well, and come to the same exact bottom line number. So if you're able to sell at higher volumes, you could essentially lower your margins and still make the same amount of same bottom line in the long run. So now you're able to cater to maybe more budget conscious individuals that wouldn't have necessarily bought your product before, or maybe would have gone with a lower priced competitor, something like that. So think in terms of what methodology works well for you. It's not always 100% exclusively, highest margin per unit as possible. So think about that kind of sales mentality that's going to work best for your product, your service, your business, your customer, things like that.
Yeah, those are like a couple. I like how there's different ways that you can build in the diversification into your business. So you can really choose like where you want to start and what works best for you. Um, okay, so Melissa, my next question is for you. How do you build flexibility into your business model while staying true to your core mission and values?
Yeah, I think sometimes I can be faulted for being too flexible in terms of different, and depending on what we mean here, right? Because I like to be creative and out of the box thinking of what business can look like, right? And when I think about this question, there's almost like this juxtaposition between mission and values and what I'm assuming is like profitability. Like there's this kind of comparison of like it's one or the other, and these things can be at odds with each other. When in reality, it doesn't have to be, and it definitely can be more so proof that your mission and values are really working, right? And so my team right now, we're in the midst of like a fun leadership leveling up experience where we're actually going through like three different advisors all at the same time who are helping us like achieve the next level as a leadership team. I've been reading through this book called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, where they talk about, we have all these KPIs, key performance indicators for all our roles, around our revenue, our profitability, our customers, our average transaction item or transaction value. But when it comes down to working as a team, what is like one specific thing that like helps us know we are either winning or losing? And is it hitting your revenue like on a quarterly basis? Is that the scorecard that it's helping you know if you're winning as a team or not? Is it your profitability? That's a little bit harder to like maybe know on a quarterly basis. But what we came to is that for Brewpoint, for coffee shops, the metric that we can look at that helps us know, like, that we are staying true to our mission and values and we are being a successful business is customer loyalty. How many times a customer comes in, not just once, but 5, 10, 20, 50 times. That's the secret for us to be able to know we're doing an amazing job both on our mission, our values, and as a business model. And so for every business model, there's going to be a little bit different how you think about that because for us, people can come in technically like, 100 times in a year. And so customer loyalty for us is so key to know we're successful. But it's kind of that great merger in my mind of if someone feels they're like included, that they belong, that they like love our community, and we're doing something well in a business standpoint, that's the metric that helps me know whether or not we're winning.
Ooh, I like that a lot. So the book was The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Is that
Mhm.
right? Okay, great. But that is so helpful too to say like again to drill down like what is the real like core metric of, what we're talking about so that you can make those decisions but also keep your business, which I think is really important.
And I
Okay.
give one more quick example, just because so I run events for entrepreneurs, kind of just like separately for fun. And so I do kind of, it's a different type of model, but I want to bring it up because community events in general, a lot of times it's more mission-based for me. But there's creative ways of thinking out of the box to make sure that you're paid, everyone, you can do amazing things. And so when people think of events, they can also think about like tickets, sales, right? But the one thing that I've been thinking about a little bit more differently has been, well, who has money and what kind of value do events bring? And so if I can get $20,000 in scholarship funds and then charge only $5 a ticket, then I can have a different business model, right? That helps me stay true to my mission values of bringing in accessible events for business owners while also being able to be flexible in a way that doesn't have to always look like it has to be the customer paying for everything. So I'm just bringing that as a quick little additional thing of like, there's other ways of thinking through structurally of how to be a successful business without making your customers always be the ones paying for the value you're providing.
Ooh, that's a great point. So are you saying you get like it's sponsored so that folks can attend, and then the cost of attending is like really, really inexpensive?
Yep. Essentially, for my events, they're about $18,000 events, and so I get that fully sponsored, including my time. And then it's $5 a ticket just to make sure people show up at the door.
Wow, that's such a great idea. I love the creativity and being flexible and still again going back to that core mission. And the thing I really like about this whole conversation is that your business can still very much be your business and what you want it to. And this is about preparing and keeping it so even when times get tough and chaotic, hopefully these strategies prepare you to like manage those so that you're not just scrambling, doing whatever. That is really cool. Okay, Oren, my next question is you. What does a basic business continuity or emergency plan look like for a small business, and where should someone start if they don't have one yet?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, very simply put, a continuity plan or an emergency plan is basically a what do we do in the work with a worst case scenario situation. So really, the first step I think is figuring out what does that worst case scenario look like. Maybe there's multiple worst case scenarios. You know, maybe you're a storefront on a beach boardwalk in Florida, and you probably have to plan for a worst case scenario in terms of inclement weather, things like that. But that's essentially what it looks like. It's always planning for worst case scenario. And I would say that the two biggest kind of pillars of a plan like that are going to be people. You need people you can trust. You need somebody that you can trust to run the business. If for some reason you're just not available for an extended period of time, you know that things will keep running and you have the people there that you can trust that are going to do that. Now, there's an inherent risk for those of you that are sole proprietors, and I can't say this without mentioning that, because with a sole proprietor, you are the business and the business is you. There's really no differentiation. So having the business continuing if you are not available can be rather problematic as a sole proprietor. So, there's just something to consider there. For those of you that are maybe considering establishing a legal entity like an LLC or a corp, something like that, there's a risk element associated with sole props that you want to consider there in making that decision. The second pillar, I would say, is systems and protocols. I mean, you have to have processes in place for those situations that can occur. And it's not just saying, hey, let's just do this. It's actually documenting out in a very mechanical and very step-by-step process. This needs to happen. This needs to happen. This needs to happen in so much detail and so much like in such a comprehensive way that you can literally give that document to somebody that's never seen it before and knows exactly what to do. Like that's how hand-holding of a document that needs to be. So having people you can trust and having the processes in place, formalized and available and accessible for those kind of quick, okay, like it's code red, let's make this happen. Those I think are the two biggest pillars to a any kind of contingency planning or continuity planning. Yeah, always just planning for worst case scenario.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I love that you mentioned that document is something anyone can pick up anywhere and utilize. And I think we've talked about, growth. And so it kind of sounds like as folks are thinking about growing and maybe hiring on folks, this should be one of the things that they consider doing early on if you're a sole prop, because without that, it's tough to keep the business going if anything happens. Um, Love all of those points. Melissa, I think I wanted to go to you because I remember you had kind of an interesting story about an emergency plan. So do you have an emergency plan? And if so, like what prompted you to create one?
Yeah. And this actually kind of ties with the next question around like sleeping better at night, because the thing that helps me sleep better at night is having the emergency plan. And so it all kind of like it was a little anxiety orienting when I was like in the mindset of it and building it out. But essentially, earlier this year, my husband and I are both in the business. He's my co-founder, and him and I were going on our 10-year wedding anniversary to Spain and Portugal. And before we went, I was kind of spinning out of just like, what if we didn't come back? This is the longest that we're, away. Like, what if something happened? How would the business like function? Would they be okay? And it took that kind of catalytic moment for me to be like, okay, I'm gonna grab a template from my attorney and just like make as a robust of a plan as possible, imagining like Angelo and I were not coming back. And like who would be in charge of Brewpoint, and like what would that look like with our leadership team, and how would their votes count, and like what goals would I set for them, and what options would I give to them between like selling the company or keeping the company, or who on our team would I maybe want to even sell it to before going externally. How do I make it as clear as possible of what I want this to accomplish, beyond me making those decisions. And so I frantically like created a 10-page document on like what this looked like. And after I like did that, like I just felt like I could breathe, not just for vacation, but even like beyond that, because it was like, oh, I can imagine myself taking a step back, not just, like indefinitely in that scenario, but like this feels good enough for like I could see myself incrementally taking steps back over the next 3, 5, 10 years. I have people I can trust. And that partially is what also prompted me having this pretty intensive advisory experience with my leadership team during the summer. Was thinking like I would want my leadership team to have advisors if, I were to take any steps back at any point in time. And that for those relationships to be built, for people to feel invested in, for them to know like what their profit sharing like percentages would be and their buy-in for something like this. It was really exciting and invigorating to be thinking about what a company can look like on a legacy standpoint, not just what it means for me in this moment. And even though I don't have any intentions of like not being CEO of my company, I it just felt really freeing to have that option.
Yeah. Oh, that is Really cool. Well, I mean, not the, I know there was like a panic in creating it, but very cool about the after effects and what it allowed you to visualize for what the future of your business could look like if you were taking a step back, but still knowing that it would be okay. And I just want to pause here too, because we're going to have a bit of a Q&A in a bit. So if you have questions for Oren or Melissa or both, please drop those in the chat and we'll do our best to get to as many of those as possible. Oren, my next question's for you. What financial tools or habits can help business owners build a cushion for unexpected costs?
Hmm. First and foremost, you need a budget. You need financial projections, some sort of forecasting out. Basically taking your previous sales, previous year's sales, using that as a baseline to kind of what future sales might look like. Building in key assumptions, again, kind of going back to what's happening in the environment. Is there more competition coming that's stealing your base? How do you bake that into your forecast? Honestly, just first and foremost, I mean, and this isn't just for emergency planning, this is running a business, is setting a budget and establishing, 1 to 2 to 3 year financial forecasts. And that's where you can kind of see visually, this is what I have available. This is the cash reserve or the emergency fund that we will have available at any given moment. And of course, you're with forecasting, you're predicting the future, so it's not going to be 100% accurate all the time, but it's always a working document. It's always something that you adjust and fine tune as time goes on. The idea here is to use it to a certain degree of confidence so that you can kind of start, planning and executing around those estimations, right? Aside from that, just being very aware of how, what your financial statements are telling you. So your profit and loss statement is telling you how much, profit you're generating. Your cash flow is telling you how much cash you have in the bank at any given moment. And your balance sheet is telling you, how much ownership you have in the company when you're factoring things like, your assets and how much money you owe, your liabilities, right? So all those three combined gives you a solid picture of how your business is performing financially. I think insurance is probably an important aspect here. I think every business, my personal philosophy, every business should have some sort of general liability or comprehensive insurance. But depending on what type of business you are, what kind of products you sell, there might be certain kind of niche coverages that you might want to look into just to protect yourself for any kind of contingency situation. And then this isn't really necessary, but this is just a tip that I would have for everybody. I don't understand why more businesses don't do this, is utilize financial markets. So, interest rates are high right now. Why not let that work for you? If you are building your cash reserve, if you do have a steady amount of cash available, that should not just be sitting in a generic business savings account at Bank of America, right? You're actually losing money by doing that because it's not tracking against inflation. So you want to put it in a money market account. You want to put it in a high yield savings account. You want to put it in a certificate of deposit, something. Well, maybe not a CD because you want that liquid, you want that available. But put it somewhere where that money can grow money, right? Where that money can actually work for you. Yeah, I just saw in the comments, Tashara just said the words right out of my mouth. Exactly. So if you are sitting on cash, if you are building out your reserve, you should absolutely not be letting that just sit in a bank account because you are actually losing value on that dollar by doing so. So a high yield savings account, it's basically just a savings account with an interest rate. It's the same thing. You can pull it out anytime you want. It works just as a savings account does, but you're actually generating interest income. So there's no risk to it. So I don't, that's my tip. And I see a lot of businesses not doing that. And I'm just curious as to why. But just a little tip. While the interest rate environment is quite high, you might as well take advantage of it.
Yeah, I like that too because you talked about so many great ways to like stay informed of what the environment is doing. And of course, being resilient and protecting your business about it, but also taking advantage of those things is another key part you can't really do if you're not like paying attention to what's going on in the environment. So I love how all of this is just tying together. Okay, so we are going to get into the final question. And Melissa, I want to start with you and then Oren. What is one piece of advice you'd give to someone who wants to make their business more resilient but doesn't know where to start?
Just to kind of keep on topic for myself, because it's a lot about mindset, right? I think there's a twofold balance and resiliency. It's not just about being prepared. It definitely is about being prepared. It is about thinking about all the things that could happen and safeguarding those pieces. But it's also about vision and optimism and like having that strength of mind to be able to pull you through those hard things. It is one of those things where, I mean, I talk to my team about it because I do just feel like as entrepreneurs, we're just kind of delusional. And though that can be like a negative thing, or you can feel somewhat of shame about it in some way, shape, or form, it's just so much of what is needed to create something out of nothing. You have to like, and I don't want to feel bad about it. Sometimes it doesn't come, happen the way that I think it'll be, but like having that kind of like eternal optimism of like, even if it doesn't turn out the way I think it'll be, like it'd still be worth doing. Helps pull me through any tough stuff, or, because everything kind of ebbs and flows in terms of the positivity of it all. The other side of it for me, though, is being really realistic about the strengths that I bring to the table, and then complementing who's around me, in terms of people who are more detail oriented, who are more safeguard oriented, who are more thinking about all those things that would keep me up at night if I didn't have this like eternal optimism and delusion. And they are the reasons why I am at the level of business I'm at the end of the day, is that like I don't tend to have people on my leadership team who are like me. I tend to have people who balance me. Almost too much so that like it kind of all balances, since I'm leading the company. So I do think being really like seeing that and choosing to have people who are not going to be yes people to your vision all the time, who are thinking more of those safeguards, helps that balance.
Yeah, that is a great point. I love that. And Oren, same question for you. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who wants to make their business more resilient but doesn't know where to start?
Yeah, I think honestly, I just want to echo what Melissa is saying because I think mindset really is the first piece of this. That's the foundation for making any kind of change or progress. So just to kind of echo, I think as entrepreneurs, it's really hard once you're kind of in the swing of things. You're post-launch, you've got your day to day, every day kind of starts feeling a little bit more routine. It's really hard to get out of that mindset. Sometimes to think about other back burner items that you need in the business that you haven't really been able to focus on because you're focused on the day to day, right? And you're only one person, right? Um, so my advice is just, think about maybe a weekend. It doesn't have to be next weekend, doesn't have to be the weekend after. Maybe it could be a couple months down the road. But think about one weekend that you could just put on your calendar, block it off, and just name it as Resiliency Planning Weekend. Just officially formalize 2 or 3 days that you can carve out that you commit to stepping out of your day to day for a second and just really, really just focusing on, continuity planning, resiliency planning, contingency planning, and just have that be the focus and plan for it, and commit to it. And that's maybe, I mean, just depending on your business, maybe that's all you need. Maybe you can flesh out an entire comprehensive, plan and have that ready to go. And then now you don't have to worry about it, hopefully ever, but it's there for you when you need. Because I know the mental component, or the mental construct around running a business, and it's hard to kind of take yourself out of the day to day, but it's just important to do it and plan for it. Um, so yeah, I think you know, that's what I'll say. It's all about the mindset really more than anything else. It's just being willing to focus on those back burner items that are there that just eventually need to be taken care of.
Yes, I like the idea of putting it on the calendar, proactively doing it before you have to do it, because then that's a whole different kind of experience. Okay, we have some questions in the chat, and I want to move right into those. So, Melissa, the first question is for you. Do you outsource your HR? Did you hire someone? And do you have a preference?
Yeah. So for my size of company, because I think that's partially where this like falls under as well. So I have about 35 employees, but 20 to 25 full time. So I don't have to have an HR person, but someone in my company has to more clearly own HR, right? Even if they're not an expert in it. So what we do is that I have my finance person also own HR. I also own HR to some degree, depending on what it is. And then we have an outsourced HR company in the Chicagoland area called HR Source. And essentially I pay like $1,200 a year to call them up, essentially like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, if I have any HR questions. I have HR attorneys on like that I can call. They have a hotline to talk with them, consult HR consultants, and they help me with anything I need to build out on an HR standpoint.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great like perspective. And I didn't know that that resource existed. That's wonderful. Okay, Oren, next question. I'm going to kick it to you. At the moment, this individual has a sole proprietor, and they're wondering at what point do they need to form a board, or if you have any recommendations for when someone should do that.
For a board of directors.
Great question. I think so. Maybe they'll drop in the chat so I can.
Yeah.
Yes, a board of directors. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any kind of, particular threshold. I think it's very, very specific to the business, and what the businesses does and what the leadership direction is. You know, and what the purpose of the board would be. What kind of board would it be? Would it be like more of an advisory board that doesn't, that just acts kind of on more of a consultation basis, or an actual board of directors that's like voting on high level decisions? I think those are the questions that need to be asked. I will say, if you feel ready to bring on a board of directors, you'll probably feel ready to establish a legal business entity. I've never come across like a sole proprietorship with a board of directors. I could be wrong. Maybe others have, but um, I think okay, it is already an LLC. Yeah, so I think really it just comes down to where are you hoping to take the company, and why would that necessitate um, a type of board of directors for whatever reason that is. Um, when you think about a board, you also have to realize you're relinquishing control. You're not making 100% decisions at that point. You're giving up some of that decision-making power to other people. And why could that be beneficial? That could be beneficial because you might have folks that are really plugged into the industry and have expansive networks that can help build the business. And you could have individuals that just have a really, really, really strong skill set, or knowledge base about that business that you would want to have, to be able to help make decisions. So there's a lot of decisions and kind of strategic elements when it comes to putting together a board of directors. And you always have to weigh out your pros and cons, but ultimately it's all about taking the business to the next level and what's the best way to do that. And in many cases, it's bringing in individuals with specific resources, skill sets, maybe deep pockets that can help to kind of thrust that business to the next level. But in so doing, you are diluting decision making to not just yourself, but to other people as well, which may be a good thing. I for one, when I was running my business, I was not always the best person to make certain decisions. I would have loved to have a functional board of directors, people that were a little bit more, plugged into the live event and production world. People that invested in things like, live events, music festivals, conventions, things like that, that understand those elements a little bit better. So yeah, those are the kind of the things you have to think about. But I wouldn't say that there's a specific time where you you meet a threshold to take it to that next level. It's really just dependent on the business.
Yeah, that those are great points in thinking about why would you need one? What is the main goal, or what do you see the future of the business being? I know there are a couple more questions in the chat, but we are basically at time. So I dropped again our free business advising sessions here because we talked about it earlier and I saw some questions about where can I find a mentor, or where can I, get this advice, or here's what's going on specifically in my business. The best way to get the most valuable information is going to be to have someone to walk alongside you to understand your industry and your business. And we want to make sure you have that information. So that is what our business advising is for. It's not just for one-off questions. It really is for having that relationship. So I'm dropping it again because I think it's very helpful. I also just want to thank Melissa Villanueva and Oren SHANI for coming in and sharing so much valuable information in such tight timeline on resilience. It's a conversation that is continuing to be ongoing, and I really appreciate y'all coming and sharing your expertise today. And I also want to thank all the business owners. We know that you are busy, and we appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to come and hear some information. We hope it helps you in building a more resilient business, and we will see you all in the next one. Bye, everyone.